everyone, my name is Mads, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to be talking about books that I am really hoping I might give 5 stars when I read them. If you saw my video maybe a month or so ago of my stats for so far this year, one of the things I spoke about was I have read a lot of really good books this year, but very few which I've then given 5 stars, which I am so easily pleased. I have been a person for years and years who has given more 5 stars and 4 stars than anything else. And so I don't know what has happened this year that I suddenly am not giving books 5 stars, but it's happened and we want to turn that around. So I've trawled through my shelves and picked off 10 books, 5 in the kind of sci-fi fantasy speculative category and 5 that are lit fic, contemporary, that sort of side of things, that I think have a pretty good chance of being 5-star reads. I might be entirely wrong. It's also concerning how hard it was for me to find 10 books. I will never buy something I don't think I really want to read. I obviously do not always think a book is going to be a 5-star. I can still be intrigued by it. But it was surprising how few stood out to me as I really think I could give that 5 stars. But nonetheless, I'll talk you through these 10 books. I'd love to know if you've read any of them, what you think in the comments, whether you think it will be a good option for me, or whether you've got other ideas you think it could be a 5-star book for me. And then maybe over the rest of this year, next year, I might do some vlogs reading some of these, but we will see if that happens. Before I start talking about any of these books, obviously I've not read any of them and I'm someone that likes going into a book relatively blind, so I don't know a huge amount about them, but I will do my best with what I understand to be the synopsis at this point and why I think it might be a 5-star. So I'm going to start with the contemporary literary fiction books, which I've realised all 5 of which are queer, which was not intentional, but to be honest, makes sense for who I am. The first of which is Idlewild by James Frankie Thomas. This is such an interesting one. I've had my eye on this for a while. Christy actually originally saw this and sent it to me saying she thought I'd like it, and I absolutely think she'll be right. This follows 2 students at a kind of elite New York high school that have an obsessive friendship that borders on romantic. Is there sort of other vibes going on? And as far as I know, they take part in a school play and in doing this meet another pair of students who almost feel like they reflect them and their dynamic, and I think it ends in this like 4-person, 4 sides of a square drama. I don't necessarily think like love triangle vibes, but something. And then I think we're also following them maybe a few years later once things have, I'm going to assume, exploded in some way. I don't know, but queer, elite schools, obsession, strange dynamics is absolutely up my street and I think could be really interesting. Though I will also say it is so dependent on how it's written. This is also something that could absolutely not agree with me at all. So we're going to have to see how it goes. Next up is Neon Roses by Rachel Dawson. This is one I've had for quite a while now and haven't got around to, but actually very recently heard someone talking about how good the kind of sex scenes were in this, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm moving up the TBR because it's not a romance book, but I don't know why, that just something about that dynamic in this book made it seem really interesting to me. But this follows sometime in the 80s in Wales when the miners' strike is going on, and you're following this, I think, teenager, probably young woman who her family are really struggling with everything going on around them, and then the gay and lesbian support the miners come to Wales, and I think she becomes involved with someone there, and you know, queerness in that era is always really interesting, and I've heard really good things about this one. And the way this is described on the back as like the 1-line synopsis is Neon Roses is a heartwarming, funny and a little bit filthy queer coming of age story with a cracking 80s soundtrack. I don't always love things that are bordering on historical, but I think this could be a really interesting one. It's in a very interesting time in history and I've heard very good things. So I'm very excited to give it a go. Next up is one I just should give 5 stars, and that's Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. As it says here, this is the Booker Prize winner for 2020, so this is a very well-renowned book. He also has another book called Young Mungo, which I also own. I don't know much about this. I know it's sad. It doesn't have a blurb on the back or anywhere, which is very unhelpful. But some of the snippets on the back from different reviewers say it's a book that creates an amazingly intimate, compassionate, gripping portrait of addiction, courage and love. A heartbreaking novel, both beautiful and brutal, the story of a boy bullied and buffeted by events trying to grow up in a hostile world. It's set in the 80s, again in Glasgow. I didn't realise I had 2 books that were very similar settings, but there we go. And I don't know much about it. All I know is my mum's read it, a few of my friends have read it, and every single person that has read it has tried to get me to read it. I think it's sad. I know it's queer. Again, that's about my knowledge, but won't lie to you, that's all I knew before reading A Little Life, and that is my pretty much only 5 stars so far this year. So we're going to take it and we're going to roll with it. Next up is Nevada by Imogen Binnie. This is one that was absolutely put in my hands by my mum. She read this, I want to say a couple years ago now, and instantly was like, you just need to read it. I'm just going to read you the blurb for this one because I think it's the easiest way. Nevada follows Maria, a young trans woman who, after several years of personal and professional failures in Bohemian New York, is embarking on her version of the Great American Road Trip. James is an unhappy stoner who works in a Walmart in Star City, Nevada. After a chance meeting, the pair quickly form an unlikely but powerful connection that will have big implications for them both. Poignant and outrageous in equal measure, this is a groundbreaking cult classic that went on to inspire a literary movement, and it also has a quote from Tori Peters on the back, saying, "The book that launched the trans writing scene that changed my life, it remains an original." So not only does it sound like a really interesting book, a really interesting plot that I know my mum really enjoyed, I also love that it was such an important book in like trans literature. So again, I'm excited. Young people exploring and going out and doing what they want with their lives is obviously relatively relevant to me and definitely something I'm really, really looking to read more about at the moment, and I think this could fit the bill perfectly. I'm just realising that like half of this stack is just books my mum's trying to get me to read, but you know what? She's right most of the time, so we're going with it. And that is true for this one as well, which is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. So this is completely different to a lot of books I read. Unsurprisingly, a good chunk of the books that I read are set in the UK or the US, and this is set in Nigeria, which is very different for me and very exciting. I would like to broaden my reading tastes. It's not an active thing I'm doing at the moment, but it's definitely something I want to start dipping toes into and making sure that I am reading a wider variety of stories, especially as at the moment I'm not getting a ton of 5 stars. So maybe reading from completely different places is what I need to spice it up a bit and reignite my kind of absolute in-depth passion for certain books. Again, for this one I'm going to read the blurb because it is just easier. One afternoon in a Nigerian town, a mother opens her door to discover her son's body wrapped in colourful fabric. What follows is the tumultuous, heart-wrenching story of one family's struggle to understand a child whose spirit is both gentle and mysterious. In childhood, Vivek suffers disorienting blackouts, moments of disconnection between self and surroundings. As an adolescent, Vivek finds solace in friendship with the daughters of the Niger wives, foreign-born women married to Nigerian men. But Vivek's closest bond is with Osita, a worldly, high-spirited cousin. As their relationship deepens and Osita struggles to understand Vivek's escalating crisis, the mystery gives way to a heart-stopping act of violence and a moment of exhilarating freedom. And it says at the top, what does it mean for a family to lose a child they never really knew? I, in my head, had this as a book following Vivek being trans, but it may be queer in other ways. It may not be queer at all. Maybe I've got that completely wrong. But nonetheless, this is one my mum loves. It's one I know Spoops loved, I believe. It's a very well-renowned book and one that I've just not got around to for far too long at this point and need to make that happen. I would say soon, but you know, 10 books is 2-3 months of reading, so there's no guarantee any of these will be happening that soon as a massive mood reader. But that's my little contemporary stack of books that I would really hope I might give 5 stars. So let's move on to fantasy. First up in the fantasy category is an absolute classic, and I do not know how many of these lists and TBRs I've put this book onto, but we're back here again. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. It is actually appalling that I've not read this book yet. I think it's been on about 8 TBRs since about 2021 at this point. I really need to read it. I really do. But I'm really bad at picking up sci-fi series, and I am trying to finish them off at the moment, so should I be picking up a new one? Maybe not. But this follows a crew of people that are on a patched up ship and basically, I think, get a mission to do a big job. All I know is it's queer, found family. Everyone says it's the most wholesome, enjoyable read ever. I don't feel like I need to know more than that. So many people adore this series, and it is people who I trust their recommendations. I know Katie Brightness reads, I know Sandra, I'm definitely missing a load of other people, but it has to be done. The fact I haven't read this yet, especially considering Psalm for the Wild Built, the Monk and Robot duology, is one of my favourite books ever, and that's by Becky Chambers. It's just criminal I've not read this, and I'm aware that this is quite different to that from what I've heard, but it just needs to happen, really, doesn't it? Next up is Threadneedle by Carrie Thomas. So this is one I've had for a hot minute, and I got this almost entirely, if not entirely, because of Lauren from Fiction Tea, who I'll link down below, who loves this series. But I've been putting off reading the first one, even though I thought I'd enjoy it, very simply because the first one and a novella came out, and then there was like no news of the next book for ages. But the second book, I don't know if it's final or not, is now out. So I feel like I could get started with a hope that I would then be able to carry on. All I know about this is that it's urban fantasy. That's it. Should we read the blurb together? Because I should probably know what this is about. But for context, I just love urban fantasies, and those have been my favourites for so many years that basically hearing that and Lauren loving it, who also loves a lot of my favourite books, I was like, that's all I need to know, I'll probably love it. But let's find out a bit more. Anna's aunt has always warned her of the dangers of magic, its twists, its knots, its deadly consequences. Now Anna counts down the days to the ceremony that will bind her magic forever, until she meets Effie and Attis. They open her eyes to a London she never knew existed, a shop that sells memories, a secret library where the librarian feeds off words, a club where revellers lose themselves in a haze of spells. But as she is swept deeper into this world, Anna begins to wonder if her aunt was right all along. Is her magic a gift or a curse? Will I love this? I honestly have no idea. But an urban fantasy set in London that someone with a similar reading taste to me has enjoyed feels like a pretty good shot to me. Next is another one that has absolutely been hanging around for way too long, and that is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. All I know about this book is I think it has like multiple timelines, parallel worlds, time travel-y something, timey-wimey stuff vibes, and it's a bit weird. I think it might be a little bit queer, but I feel like I'm not sure about that. And everyone loves this and loves the film. I like weird, I like strange, complicated things, but it's very long, and I started it once, and I read a few pages, and I went, ooh, I don't like how that's written. That feels like a lot of brain energy, and it feels like it's written that way for quite a big chunk of the book, and I'm not sure how I'm going to get on with that. So I put it down once. I'm going to try it again, because just everything about this book screams a book I would love. So to read the very tiny blurb, it says, souls cross ages like clouds cross skies, 6 interlocking lives, 1 amazing adventure. In a narrative that circles the globe and reaches from the 19th century to a post-apocalyptic future, Cloud Atlas erases the boundaries of time, genre and language to offer an enthralling vision of humanity's will to power and where it will lead us. That sounds great. That sounds so up my alley. Now I just need to read it. Next up we have a very recent purchase, which is When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. So this is a teeny tiny little novella I just picked up, it just came out. And I loved Veronica Roth back in the day, back in Divergent days, but I've read a couple of her books more recently and not enjoyed them. So you might question why this is on the list. I've just been hearing rave reviews about this and her other novella, Arch Conspirator, which I also own but haven't read yet. And I'm just going to read the blurb of this because I don't really know what happens. It's fantasy-esque and sounds interesting. We bear the sword and we bear the pain of the sword. Pain is Dimitar's calling. His family is one in a long line of hunters who sacrifice their souls to slay monsters. Now he's tasked with a deadly mission, find the legendary witch Baba Yaga. To reach her, Dimitar must ally with the ones he's sworn to kill. Pain is Ayla's inheritance. A fear-eating Zmora with little left to use, Ayla awaits death from the curse she carries. When Dimitar offers her a cure in exchange for her help, she has no choice but to agree. Together they must fight against time and the wrath of Chicago underworld, but Dimitar's secrets and his true motives may be a thing that actually destroys them. I've no idea, but I can get on really well with a novella sometimes. They're hit and miss, but this could be the sort of thing that just pulls me in and spits me out and I will be obsessed with it forever. So, hopeful. And it's a smaller one to have some hope for than these chunkers, so we're taking it. And then the final sci-fi fantasy one I have, which is also a recent release, is The Ministry of Time by Killian Bradley. Ooh, that is very shiny. Okay, so again, I don't know much about this. It's time travel, timey-wimey stuff, which I kind of love. We're going to read the blurb together, but I'm going to make a guess first. The vibe I've got from the bits I've heard about this, also for context, I will have absolutely read the blurb of all these books at some point. I just have the memory of a goldfish, so I can never remember what they're about, which works well for someone that likes going in blind. But my guesstimate for this is it's giving me 5 from Umbrella Academy vibes. And like, this is how you lose the Time War vibes, not in the writing style of that one, but in like the actual kind of plot. So we have the Ministry of Time, this agency that is trying to control or alter what happens in certain timelines, and so they send people around to make that happen. Again, I've heard this has good sex scenes, which is fascinating. So let's read the blurb. Let's see if I'm even slightly right. A boy meets a girl, the past meets the future, a finger meets a trigger, the beginning meets the end. England is forever, England must fall. Oh, I'm gonna like this. I'm gonna like this a lot, okay. In the near future, a disaffected civil servant is offered a lucrative job in a mysterious new government ministry gathering expats from across history to test the limits of time travel. Her role is to work as a bridge, living with, assisting and monitoring the expat known as 1847, Commander Graham Gore. As far as history is concerned, Commander Gore died on Sir John Franklin's doomed expedition to the Arctic, so he's a little disoriented to find himself alive and surrounded by outlandish concepts such as washing machine, Spotify, and the collapse of the British Empire. With an appetite for discovery and a 7-a-day cigarette habit, he soon adjusts, and during a long, sultry summer, he and his bridge move the awkwardness to genuine friendship to something more. But as the true shape of the project that brought them together begins to emerge, Gore and the bridge are forced to confront their past choices and imagined futures. Can love triumph over the structures and histories that have shaped them, and how would you defy history when history is living in your house? Fascinating. So less timey-wimey than I expected, just a character from the past. But you know what? I'm still here for it. I still think this has such a good chance. I think it's quite a divisive book. I've heard some fantastic things, but I feel like overall on Goodreads it's not got the highest rating, so who knows? But that completes the fantasy sci-fi segment of Hopeful 5-star reads. And that's it. As I said at the beginning, if you think any of these 10 books have a particularly high chance of being a 5-star for me, from what you know of my reading taste, whether you've loved or hated any of these books, please let me know. And any 5-star predictions you have for myself or yourself, let me know in the comments. I'm always intrigued to hear. Fingers crossed some of these will work for me, and fingers crossed maybe we will have some vlogs in the future talking about some of these books, but we will see. If you enjoyed this, obviously comment down below. If you don't have something specific to talk about, just put a little hourglass emoji, because a lot of these books are timey-wimey. But that is it for this video, so bye, and I'll see you in the next one.